Just Energy with naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theories that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swing of a pendulum to the waves in the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. In the same way, things such as rocks and minerals vibrate very slowly and at speeds that are imperceptible to us. Living things such as plants, animals, and man vibrate faster and appear to be alive. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is if we take everything in our own universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita as she explores questions such as, what are we made of? Why do we get sick? How can I live a more balanced and whole life? Call in and talk to her and her thought-provoking guest. Send us your questions and get the help you need to move beyond any obstacle or challenges that may be affecting your life, right from the source. So stay tuned and explore your possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Oh, as always, yet another great show. This week we're going to be talking to Susan Shumsky about her new book, Ascension, Connecting with the Immortal Masters and Beings of Light. But a couple of announcements before we bring Susan on. Don't forget, we are still doing our Mind Yoga question for the week. And yes, ding, 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 we had a winner last week. And later on in the show, I'll announce the winner as well as provide the new question for this week. And this week, the winner will get a copy of Dr. Zhigang Shaw's book, Divine Soul Songs. He's a #1 New York Times best-selling author. And also, anyone who enters, whether you have the correct answer or not, will be eligible to win a free psychic reading from the students of the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Susan, and we are going to get her on and get started with this interview because it's going to be fascinating. Dr. Susan Shumsky is a pioneer in the field of personal development. She's a professional speaker, doctor of divinity, author, and workshop leader who is highly respected in the spiritual community. Foremost authority in spirituality, meditation, and prayer, she has written several books teaching her own unique form of meditation, prayer, and spiritual healing. And Susan was on the show once before talking about tapping into your inner voice. Susan, what was the name of your last book? That was wonderful.
How to Hear the Voice of God.
Yeah, that was it. That was such a good book. And I'm so glad to have you back on with you and your new book. And I know I'm going to learn a lot because as we spoke before the show started, studying our immortal masters and beings of light just hasn't been where my focus has been. I've been more in, as I say, with the bad kids in town, studying about ghosts and attached entities and demons. And so it's going to be a little learning experience for me. Susan, let's start here. Your new book is called Ascension, Connecting with the Immortal Masters and Beings of Light. But who are the immortal masters and these beings of light, or what are they, or tell me about them?
Well, there are many different planes of existence. There's the physical world, the mental world, the astral world, and the spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, there are many different types of beings that live there. A God lives there, various angels, archangels, and also ascended masters, beings of light. And so there are various classes of beings, and I don't know if I should call them classes, but just various types of beings. And some of these immortal beings are present, and these are just different dimensions of reality. So ascended masters and beings of light live in the spiritual world, along with God and angels, and so forth.
Cool. So are these immortal masters different from like our higher self? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to. Go ahead.
That's a very interesting question because, in fact, who we are is much more amazing and profound than we could ever imagine. And in fact, some of these immortal beings are in our own stream of identity. So, yes, in fact, some divine being or immortal master could be your higher self. And that's kind of an amazing thing to wrap your head around, that in fact, for example, Jesus Christ could be in our own identity stream, or the great Mahamuni Babaji could be in our identity stream, or Saint Germain, or one of these other amazing beings, in fact, is part of our own inner identity. So that is a little bit unusual to think about that or to imagine that. But in fact, our own higher self is magnificent, it's profound, it's huge, it's something that we can't even really fathom. And in fact, our own higher self also includes our God self, which is God within us. So in fact, God even resides within our own higher self, because that ultimately is who we truly are, and ultimately our destiny as a human being is to realize that we are God, to realize that our true nature is inner divinity.
And I think that's a concept that a lot of religious traditions really steer clear of. There are some that totally are on that groove, and then there are other ones that, God is external to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just going to put forth a small argument otherwise. Okay, so every scripture in the world, every single scripture in the world that exists tells us that God is everywhere present. God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. God is everywhere. In every single little atom of this universe, God exists. So God is everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. So are you somewhere? Rita, are you somewhere?
I hope so.
So you're somewhere.
Yes,
so
I am.
If God is everywhere, and if you are somewhere, then by definition, you must be where God is. God must be within you. So if you say that God is omnipresent, then you are stating, in fact, that God is within you, because you can't be separate from somewhere. And God is everywhere. So that's really the reality. So God has to be, by definition, within you, because God is pervading everything and everyone. Therefore, God is an aspect of your own higher being, an aspect of your reality, of your true reality, of your true self.
Excellent. One of the things that you mentioned a little earlier, and I think I'd like to have you give some classification, or you were talking about, and you used the word classifications, and you mentioned like angels and archangels and the immortal masters and the beings of light. And could you kind of lay out that classification? I'm assuming God is the big man on top, and then there is, and I hate saying a hierarchy, but, there kind of is, of how they would lay out down to, I'll say, man.
Okay, well, many people might call it a hierarchy, but in fact, really only 4 planes of existence: the spiritual world, the mental world, the astral world, and the environment. So, our physical world. And everyone that is in the spiritual plane, I consider that to be the spiritual world. There are various aspects of that spiritual world, and there are various beings that live there. So I could define these different beings. I mean, there are angels, and angels are sort of like messengers of God. They are completely obedient to God. They do their tasks. They assist humans. They don't have the ability to attain the highest spiritual state as humans do. Humans can attain the highest spiritual state, which is full spiritual enlightenment, which is called supreme knowledge or unity consciousness or oneness or wholeness. There are gods that live in the spiritual world, and these are beings who have evolved to a great exalted state of consciousness. There are ascended masters who are beings who have been human at some point, and then they transform their physical body into a light body. They are immortal beings. They live in a light body. They can appear and disappear at any time at will, and they can take any form whatsoever. There are avatars, which are beings who are incarnations of various aspects of God. There are archangels who are sort of, more exalted angels types. The seven main archangels, such as Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and so forth. There are other aspects of the spiritual world, such as our own higher self, and our higher self has many different layers or aspects, such as our soul self or etheric soul self, our Christ self, our I am self, our God self, our universal or cosmic self, and these are just aspects of our own inner identity. So all of these beings, I wouldn't really put them in a pyramid, but I would definitely say that they're all in the spiritual world.
Fair enough. Sounds kind of crowded out there. I mean, even just
crowded,
the makeup of ourself is like, God, I didn't know I was so complicated.
Yeah, it's true. There are a lot of beings.
And that doesn't even include, like, the ghosties or the, earthbound spirits or any of those guys.
Exactly. That would be a different plane. That would be the astral plane, okay? We have the spiritual plane. That's what I was describing. And we have the astral world also, which is where the ghosties are.
I have to tell you, your guys are hysterical, and they're just like throwing these little comments at me, and I'm like, okay, zip it, because they're just cracking jokes. And I think they did that the last time, too, and I'm going, no, be good. In order to be an immortal master, one of the questions I had, which you answered, was that these immortal masters were actually alive at some time.
Not all of them. There are avatars. Actually, avatars often, they are born and they die, in fact, such as Lord Krishna. He was born, he died, he was an avatar. They are just basically God incarnated into human form. Ascended masters are humans who ascended. Avatars are descension. In other words, it's God taking on a human form for a particular purpose to intervene in the goings-on of humanity at a time when humanity needs intervention. So that would be an avatar. An ascended master is a human who has attained this exalted state. But it isn't just spiritual enlightenment. It's far beyond that because, so spiritual enlightenment would be a prerequisite to being an ascended master. But the ascended master not only has attained spiritual enlightenment, they have also attained full mastery over all the laws of nature. They've attained full mastery over the entire universe because they can manifest any physical form that they want. They can appear and reappear anywhere that they want, and they can appear to anyone that they want. Of course, it's all guided by the divine, and an ascended master can never become an ascended master unless it is the divine will for that person, for that individual. But in fact, the ascended masters were human and have attained this high state of consciousness, more than a high state of consciousness. It's a complete mastery over creation.
Would that include, you hear stories about like the gurus in India that sit on the top of a mountain, literally sit, in the snow with like a little shawl on barely or nothing on, and don't freeze to death, basically?
I've met many of those beings. I've been to India many times, and especially the Kumbh Mela, those people are present. Kumbh Mela is a big festival that takes place in India every few years. And they indeed do exist. These people are real. They're not necessarily ascended masters, though. They may or may not even be enlightened beings, but most likely they are enlightened beings if they're sitting up or walking, trekking in the Himalayas in only a loincloth.
I can't imagine, personally.
But, yeah, there's one being that I met who, he showed me his passport. It said he was born in 1892. And I was visiting at the same time that the Queen of Nepal was visiting him at the time. And she told me that he has to be at least 150 years old, though, much older than that passport said, because her grandfather knew him. And he is a person who trekked throughout the Himalayas, not only in India, but in several other countries, trekked and went to all the holy pilgrimages. And he never wore anything more than a loincloth and barefooted, and he went all over. And he did that when he was younger. But this is an example of a really enlightened being, and his name was Tit Maharaj. And he was somebody that I met in India, and amazing experience. I have a picture of him actually in the book Ascension, and a little story about him in the book.
You did. And actually, could you talk about the experience of being, because you're intuitive, and I would think when you're in the presence of somebody that has very highly elevated, and I'm going to say energy or presence or, that level of enlightenment, I would assume you're going to feel or experience something in their presence. Yes, you do.
Yes, absolutely. When you are sitting with an enlightened being, somebody who has attained a higher consciousness, you will feel waves of energy from that person, and often you'll even feel waves of bliss. Waves of bliss means you will feel grace, you'll feel blessings. I don't know how else to describe it. It's not really an experience that can be described that well in the English language, but you feel this Shakti or energy or love, bliss, grace being poured into your being, and it elevates you. It makes you feel blissful by osmosis. You are actually getting that divine energy by osmosis just by sitting in their presence. And by the way, they're not losing any energy. They're just sitting there radiating their bliss, radiating their love, radiating their level of consciousness, and you're just kind of getting it. And it's a really powerful experience. And because I've met so many of these enlightened beings throughout my life, I'm very used to this vibration, and I'm very familiar with it. So I can quite effortlessly discern, that this is the vibration. This is that vibration of divine love, of divine light, of divine peace, of divine energy that these beings radiate. But the important and essential thing for all of your listeners to understand, Rita Louise, is that every person has this within themselves, and that we can develop this bliss, this love, this light, this inner divinity. We can realize it within ourselves, and we can be an enlightened being. We can begin to radiate that divine love and light.
I just think it's interesting that they're just being.
Right.
One of the things, kind of going off topic here a minute, I would make the assumption that the person that runs around saying, well, I'm an enlightened being, and you should listen to me, would not necessarily be carrying the energy of an enlightened being?
I would run the other way if anybody claims anything like that, because it's not something that a true enlightened being would ever do. They just don't.
Mhm. I just wanted to put that point out there.
Yeah, what they do is they show you by their energy, by their actions, by their words, by their deeds. They show you that they're enlightened. They don't tell you. They would never make a claim like that. Not that I've ever experienced anyway. I've never experienced a truly enlightened being who's ever claimed to be anything.
Mhm. What about somebody like Jesus? I have to tell you. Let me tell you this. So I started doing some research for a new project that I'm working on, and I started reading a bunch of Vedic texts, and actually didn't really know that there were avatars, and I mean, a whole new world kind of started opening up for me, and I just had barely started, and I'm just like, God, this is fascinating stuff. A little thick, but fascinating. And, and they talked about that there were 10 avatars, and 9 have been here so far. And then there's thought that Jesus might have been an avatar, or maybe the last avatar hasn't incarnated on the planet yet. What are your thoughts about that, the Jesus thought, or is there really somebody else?
Okay, well, there are 10 avatars of the god Vishnu, and those are the main avatars that are talked about in the Vedas, in the Vedic literature of India. And Vishnu is the god that, there's three main gods in the Hindu pantheon. There's Shiva, who's the destroyer, there's Brahma, who's the creator, and there's Vishnu, who's the maintainer. And Vishnu is a great god who has incarnated into human form or in other forms, sometimes even in an animal form. Some of those incarnations were not human, they were actually animals. So I have a chapter in my book, Ascension, that talks about those 10 avatars of Lord Vishnu. And the main avatars, the last main avatar of Lord Vishnu was Lord Krishna. And he died in around 3000 BC. In fact, he died just very close to the time of the beginning of the long count of the Mayan calendar, the 5,000-year long count of the Mayan calendar. His death corresponds with that date, and it also corresponds with a very important date in the Indian or Hindu belief about the cycles of time. So he was a full avatar, and then many people believe that Lord Buddha was a partial avatar, that he was also an avatar. And, of course, many people believe that Jesus was an avatar, but he would not be counted as one of those 10 avatars of Lord Vishnu. He's not mentioned in the scriptures of India. But there are other avatars, too, of other gods. Other gods may incarnate in human form, in human flesh. But Vishnu incarnated or will incarnate a total of 10 times. The last avatar of Vishnu is supposed to be Kalki. Kalki would be the last avatar of Vishnu, and he is supposed to incarnate at some point in the future, and is supposed to take people into a new age, and supposedly he rides a white horse called Devaduta, and he leads a great army and so forth. So anyway, there are these 10 avatars, and the most famous of which would be Lord Krishna, Lord Rama, and Lord Buddha.
Exactly. With it's not Kali, the 10th avatar, I'm just not even going to go there with the name because I didn't write it down. Kalki. When you look at different religious traditions, I mean, everybody's waiting for a Messiah to show up. Would this be kind of put into that same category? And is it possible that the coming of Kalki is actually the underlying tradition that has kind of filtered through many other religious traditions waiting for a Messiah to come?
Well, actually, the whole idea of the Messiah is really the idea of the avatar. It's the idea of avatars, plural, coming and going, coming at times when the world needs intervention, coming at times when the world needs to go into a new age or a different age. So the whole idea of the Messiah is a cyclic thing. The Messiahs, plural, they come and they go, you know. They come to usher us into a new age. Then they leave, you know. And when they leave, things are different. Now, many people believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Obviously, the people who became Christians at that time, and they didn't really become Christians, there was no such thing as Christians, but people who were followers of Jesus at that time, let's say they're followers of Jesus, they're all Jewish, but they were followers of Jesus, so they believed that he was the Messiah. Now, it isn't quite possible that he could have been the Messiah, because the Messiah is supposed to usher in, according to the Jewish religion, the Messiah would usher in an age of peace, a great age of complete peace, complete harmony, love, and so forth. And that didn't happen, so it didn't quite fit the
you think?
thing that a Messiah would be, or at least that the Jewish concept of a Messiah would be. In order to fit that profile, you'd have to bring in an age of peace and harmony.
And is that the same thoughts that would happen when Kalki returns or comes? I guess he wouldn't be returning.
Well,
he's first kind.
I don't. I'm hesitant. I haven't really said what Kalki is going to do. Kalki, in fact, is going to destroy the entire universe and bring in the next cycle of creation.
Well, and that maybe that's when there's going to be peace.
Well, yes. Supposedly he would be bringing in a new age, but you do have to have the total destruction first in order for the era of complete peace to come. So that's really what Kalki's job is. But,
you know, going with, I mean, I know we're just kind of going off here, but even if you go with, you know, apocalyptic literature, there's definitely going to be a giant reckoning before the age of peace, so that still kind of fits in with, you know...
That would fit, yes.
Christian, Judeo-Christian religious tradition.
Mm-hmm. It would fit, yeah.
I just love how everybody...
yeah.
I just love how they all fight, but when you start actually reading what everybody else says, everybody says the exact same thing.
Yeah. In all the scriptures of all religions, everywhere, they all fit together. If you read like Joseph Campbell, he managed to decipher all of this. He unraveled all of this. He was able to see the connections of all the major religions and how the same myths are in every religion.
Mm-hmm. His work is wonderful. Well, there's the music, which means we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation about the Ascended Masters. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're talking to Susan Shumsky about her new book, Ascension, Connecting with the Immortal Masters and Beings of Light. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
Are you sensitive to energy? Want to explore the world beyond the five senses? Looking for a new career as an alternative healthcare practitioner? Then the Institute of Applied Energetics, Medical Intuition, and Energy Medicine training programs may be right for you. Our comprehensive curriculum provides students with a deep understanding of how to detect, evaluate, and transform the subtle body, as well as techniques for correcting energetic imbalances that may underscore a person's ability to experience radiant health. So if you are sensitive to energy, contact the Institute of Applied Energetics right away. Be a catalyst for changing the way healthcare is done around the world. Visit www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and start your new career today. How would you like to live long and enjoy great health? How about creating solid bones and whiter teeth? Strengthen your heart and eyes and have radiant, youthful-looking skin. There is an ancient health and longevity secret that has been used for millennia in Egypt, India, and China that can help you achieve this. For the first time in the modern world, Pearlsium brings this ancient wellness secret to you. For more information about Pearlsium, visit www.productsforthesoul.com. Before we get back to the show, I would like to thank all of you for tuning into Just Energy Radio. Many of the people I've helped over the years were listeners just like you. If you're at a junction in your life, don't stand alone at this important time. Call me or send me an email. We can set up a private consultation so that you too can experience health, healing, and wholeness in your life. To find out more about the services I offer, visit www.soulhealer.com.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and before we bring Susan back and continue our conversation about her book, Ascension, Connecting with Your Immortal Masters and Beings of Light, I'm going to announce the winner of last week's Mind Yoga question. So the question was, this group, which met in 325 AD, created a statement of beliefs which was used to define the core beliefs of Christianity. And the answer to the question was the Council of Nicaea. And so last week's winner was Mary Krobel of Alexandria, Virginia. And she won a book, Haunted Places, Sacred Spaces. And later on in the show, we'll be having this week's Mind Yoga question, where the winner will get, the first person to answer the question right will win a copy of Divine Soul Songs by Dr. Shaw, and everyone that enters will have a chance to win a psychic reading from the students at the Institute of Applied Energetics, appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. So let me get Susan back here. There she is. Hey, Susan.
Hey.
Okay. So getting back on track with our conversation about Ascended Masters, why do we care? Why would we want to get familiar with the Ascended Masters?
Oh, it's so much fun. That's why. Actually, it's more than fun. It is very, very spiritually uplifting to communicate with and to receive information and wisdom and healing from the ascended beings of light. And they can guide you, they can lift you, they can change your physical, mental, emotional makeup. They can help you to heal, to become spiritually enlightened, to realize who you really are. It's like having an inner guru or an in-house counselor to guide you on your pathway so that you can make decisions with peaceful confidence, so that you can move through your life with dignity and grace and joy, because you are following that inner guidance. You are listening to the still small voice within you, which some people call the higher self, or it may be one of these radiant beings of light who is in your inner stream of identity, or they don't necessarily even have to be in your inner stream of identity. You can still communicate with them, and they are so wonderful, and they also always have an encouraging word to say. They always have something that will lift you, that will guide you, that will heal you, that will bring you wisdom, bring you creative ideas, bring you, if you have a project you're working on or you're having difficulties, they will give you the answer at any time. You can ask at will and communicate with these divine beings. It's a very powerful, powerful tool in your toolbox to be able to do this.
Cool. does knowing something about their life here on Earth or who they are help us in working with them or help us in deciding which one we want to work with?
I think so. That's one reason why I wrote the book Ascension is so that people can familiarize themselves with the ascended masters and beings of light, and then they could actually call upon them. For example, if you want purification, a healing, purification of your mind, of your emotions, you might call upon Saint Germain and his beautiful, violent, transmuting flame to lift your energy field, to purify your mind, your emotions, your heart, and so forth. And you can call upon that violet flame and call upon Saint Germain to help you with that particular aspect of your life. You could also call upon him for the experience of ascension or to become an ascended being, because he had the secret of immortality. He used that secret of immortality. Of course, there are many other beings in my book, Ascension, that also were experts in that field, such as Lao Tzu and Master Li and many others.
You talked about a couple of the, I guess, ascended masters, gurus, whatever, that you have met in body. Which, if you had to pick, okay, which ones would you say are your favorites, or which ones have you found that you really enjoy working with? And I hope I'm not putting you on the spot with that question.
No, you're not, because really my favorite at the moment, the one that I like to visit in India, his name is Hans Baba. And he is an immortal being who is actually a walk-in, what they call Parkya Pradesh, or walk-in. His guru lived for 800 years. His name was Devraha Baba. And when he passed over in 1990, his foremost disciple, named Hans Baba, suddenly began to take on his characteristics and suddenly began to act just like he did. And, in fact, started to have his memories and started to be him. And so people realized, eventually that, yes, this, in fact, is the continuation of this same soul, that this is an immortal being who has taken on a new body, and his name is Hans Baba, Devraha Hans Baba. Now his name has become his guru's name also, Devraha Hans Baba. And anyone can visit him. He lives near Allahabad, India, and in fact, he is an immortal being, and he is an amazing being. And I've seen evidence as to the fact that he truly is Devraha Baba in a new body.
For those that are not familiar, could you explain the concept of what a walk-in is?
What a walk-in or Parkya Pradesh is transmigration of the soul. What happens is the one person wants to incarnate in a human body, but they don't want to have to go through birth and childhood and everything. So they just take on a new body. They make a contract with the person whose body exists, and they take over that body. They use that body, and the person whose body they're using, they move on. They move on into the divine light. It's as if they die, but the new soul comes into their body. And sometimes it's done when a person, in fact, has a near-death experience, when a person is ill or in the hospital or has had a major accident. And sometimes at that point is when the walk-in walks in. But, of course, in this case, it was a fully conscious experience on both people's part, the guru taking on the body of the disciple.
I have to tell you, and I'm going to play a little devil's advocate, because one of the areas, as I said earlier, is that I work with people and actually somebody said, oh, you do soul releasement. It's like, I guess I do, or spirit releasement. And with that same thing, with what you're saying, and I totally hear what you're saying, but again, I'm playing a little devil's advocate here. When you call upon your immortal master or a being of light, how can you tell it's them? How can you tell that it's not some lower entity that is, just putting camouflage on so that they can come and interact with you or possibly attach to you?
Yeah, that's a really important and good question, because in fact there are lower entities that can possess you, oppress you, talk to you, influence you, take over you. They are very clever also. There are these beings called faker spirits, and the faker spirits, they do not have your best interest at heart. They are manipulative. They will use vanity. They will feed you with what I call vanity feeding, which means they will, because human beings are susceptible to flattery, that is really one major failing that human beings have, is that we are all susceptible to flattery. So they will use that. They will flatter you. They will tell you that you're somehow special, misunderstood, different than other people, and they'll use all these little tactics to take control over you. And this is what's called a faker spirit. Well, that's very, very different and has a completely different vibration than an ascended being. An ascended master or being of light will have this incredibly elevating vibration. You will feel blissful. You will feel joyful. You will feel loved. You will feel whole and healed. Whereas an astral entity will have a really lower vibration. They will drain your energy. You will feel drained. You will feel empty. You will feel hollow. Those are the types of feelings you will have when you are in touch with an astral entity or a faker spirit. But there are, in fact, 10 tests. There are 10 tests of spiritual discernment to help you to distinguish and discern between the true divine beings or true beings of light and other kinds of beings, and that is elucidated in great detail in my books, How to Hear the Voice of God and Divine Revelation. Those two books go into great detail about the 10 tests of spiritual discernment, how you can distinguish between that true divine voice, that true divine being, and other beings that may be not so spiritual. In fact, the opposite.
They're bad.
And I've had a lot of experience with both. I've had a lot of experience with every kind of being. I was possessed. I was elevated. I lived with a divine being for 22 years in an ashram, with a true enlightened spiritual master. I, dabbled with the occult and got possessed, and in fact did even channel lower entities and energies. I mean, I've done it all. So because I've done it all, I know the difference, and I have this 10 tests of spiritual discernment, which I urge every one of your listeners, anybody who is dabbling or delving into this field and communicating with beings of any sort, it's really essential that you use the 10-test method.
So can you just, real quick kind of bullet what the test is, or is it like a whole topic? I know that we talked about it the last time, but can you just kind of summarize for the listeners, since we're deep into this calling in, and working with our masters?
Mm-hmm. Well, in a word, no, I can't really, but I can say that it's too long of a topic. It's a 3-hour conversation. But in fact, as I said, there's an elevating experience when you are in the presence of a divine being. There is a draining experience when you are in the presence of an astral entity. That should be enough for the moment. But meanwhile, go out and read How to Hear the Voice of God and Divine Revelation, and you'll be able to learn how to discern.
And I'm pretty sure we talked about that when you were on the show before, and so if people want to go ahead, they can still access the archive of that show on your little individual show page on www.justenergyradio.com. So that's cool, too. But no, your How to Hear the Voice of God was a great book. And I do urge people to get both books. Well, I think, that whole listening, I think the listening part is so important for people, especially now. Any advice on how to call them in? And I'm asking that because, again, my topic recently has been the ghosty and the bad guys, and I had someone ask me the other day, well, what about calling in your guys? And I was like, well, you don't want to just have a blanket calling all guides, come here and fix my life, because you just, if you're in a bad place, you just don't know what you're going to get. So any guidance on maybe a better way of making that connection?
Yes. So, first of all, I really don't like that word guide. And the reason I don't like the word guide is because it doesn't really specify what kind of guide. It could be a guide from the astral world. It could be a guide from the spiritual world. And truly, what you only want to call in are beings from the spiritual plane. It's really not a good idea to be communicating with beings that are not in the spiritual plane. And I know that your listeners right now are thinking in their minds, well, what about my dead grandmother? Is she in the astral world? Is she in the spiritual world? Well, in fact, people who have died, they do go into that divine light after death. As long as they're not earthbound spirits, they have gone into that big, beautiful divine light, the light of divine love. And in fact, probably your dead grandmother, most likely, is in the spiritual world. So you may call upon her, for example, and she would be a spiritual being that you can communicate with. However, we don't want to communicate with earthbound spirits. We don't want to communicate with demonic energies. They're going to lead us down the garden path definitely the wrong way, and especially these faker spirits who are very, very manipulative and who will pretend that they're something that they're not. They'll take on a high-sounding name, usually a biblical name, so that it'll gain our trust. They'll do everything they can to gain your trust, but they're not truly divine beings. They don't live in the spiritual world. But you may call upon these divine beings simply by asking. You could say, for example, Jesus Christ, please come to me now. It's really that simple. That's how you call upon the divine beings. You simply call upon them. You call upon them by name. Saint Germain, come here now. Bring your beautiful violet cleansing flame. And you can call upon these divine beings like that very simply. Ask them to come by name, and they will come. Or you could just say, please, my higher self, my soul self, or you can call upon different aspects of your higher self. My soul self, please come now. My Christ self, please come now. My I am self, please come now. My God self, my cosmic self. And you can ask then. You begin to ask, okay, what is your name? Give me your signal. What is your message? Or you can ask them questions. You can ask, what do I do about this problem I'm having in my life, and so forth. You can start to communicate with them and have a dialogue and begin to realize who they are and begin to sense their vibration. And every divine being has a different kind of vibration. So a distinct vibration which you can begin to recognize.
So I guess if they tell you something like go rob a bank or, some not good thing as their piece of advice, they're probably not somebody you should be listening to in the general sense of the word.
Yeah, I would say, that telling people to commit mass murder is not exactly a being of light, not a divine being. So, it's a good idea to just be discerning about what kind of messages you're getting. That is, one of my 10 tests is the quality of the message. It's one of the 10 tests. So, which that's a little tricky, though, because, for example, Lord Krishna is a divine being, and he told Arjuna to go and fight the battle, because that's his dharma. He's a warrior. He's supposed to go do that. So he was actually told to go murder, a great, vast army of people. In fact, he went and did it. And that was Lord Krishna who told him to do that. So, we can't really place too many moral values upon or judgments upon what we're told to do. But in general, if you're told to do something that appears to not be in alignment with morals and values and ethics, then obviously place that message on the shelf and don't act upon it, because it most likely is not truth. It most likely is an entity, or quite often something we made up in our own mind. I mean, most of the messages that people get are really their own selves talking to themselves, their own, fanciful ideas in their own brains that they just came up with out of the blue. Then there is another portion that are from entities from the astral world. That's not as common. The most common is people just making stuff up, just making weird stuff up, Oh, well, this is my, I'm channeling this whatever, and they make it up in their head. The rare one is somebody who is actually receiving messages from a divine being. That's the most rare. But it does happen. That's why it's really important to use the 10 tests.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting, now that you've kind of brought up, don't go and kill a bunch of people, was that you included, and I'm curious as to why, David, from the Old Testament David, who slept with his general's wife and then had him killed, and, he kind of did some really bad stuff. How come he was included in there?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of enlightened beings or divine beings that maybe did a lot of so-called weird stuff. And David he wrote the Psalms. And some of the Psalms are truly enlightening, inspiring, divinely revealed. So that was one reason that he was included. And also, he was the first king of Israel. He was the great founder of basically of the religion of the Jewish religion. I mean, I shouldn't say founder, but he's the one who established the Ark of the Covenant at the Dome of the Rock. Is called right now. It's called that, the place where the Dome of the Rock is right now. And so he is a being that we may acknowledge as an enlightened being. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's an ascended master, but he might be one of those beings of light. And he had tremendous faith. He was obedient to God. He had a tremendous. He was a being who, despite all of his difficulties, despite the fact that he was being hunted by Saul and all of these things, that he really was able to be a great mighty man, a great person who really had tremendous faith in God and just followed his guidance perfectly, and of course wrote beautiful divinely revealed poetry. So that I just put him in there as an example of somebody who truly was following his inner guidance.
Mm-hmm. That I'll agree. There was a question in the chat room a while ago, and they asked it again. It was something that we were talking about earlier. You mentioned the different planes of reality, the astral and the spiritual, and the beings that existed on them. And I guess they wanted some additional clarification as to the difference, I guess, between the different planes of existence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the physical plane is the plane that we live upon, that we see that we experience through our five senses: seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, feeling. That is our physical world, that we live in, and that is one plane of existence. And actually, there's many different dimensions, but these are the main ones: the physical world. Then the mental world is the world in our mind, the world that's going on inside of our heads, both individually and collectively, as collective consciousness, collective beliefs of the human race, of humanity. There are these collective beliefs, and then there's individual beliefs, habits, conditions, ideas, our own individual stories, the thing that's running us, our own patterns. That would be the mental world. And then the astral world would be where these beings who are either earthbound spirits, beings who did not go into the light after death, or they may even be demonic beings, beings who are on a lower vibrational level, beings who don't have anyone's best interest at heart. They may be malevolent, or they may be mischievous beings. These are the beings who live in the astral world. And then there's the spiritual world, and the beings who live in the spiritual world are God, angels, archangels, divine beings, deities, devas, ascended masters. All these beings live in the spiritual world. So that would be the difference.
Cool. One of the things that we didn't clarify, I mean, we're getting kind of close to the commercial, but one of the things we didn't clarify was what the beings of light were as opposed to the angels, the archangels, the immortal masters. What would the definition for the beings of light be?
Okay, well, that's a really good question, because there are ascended masters who are beings that were human beings, and then they took on a light body. In other words, they transformed their physical body into a light body. And how that happens is that the physical body gets broken down into its most basic components of the 5 elements, and then eventually into the most basic component that the body is made of, which is light. And this is pretty well known, for example, in the Buddhist tradition, and the Tibetan Buddhist tradition specifically, what they call the rainbow body, where a person goes into a small hut or a tent or something right before they're about to die, or they go into completely enclosed, like a yurt type of thing, and then they transform their physical body into a light body, and then people visibly see a rainbow. They see this light emanating from that area, from that tent or whatever it is, and the person has then disappeared in a flash of light. They have become a light being or a light body. And so that would be an ascended master or a rainbow body person who has attained that state. And then there are these other beings who live in the spiritual world, and beings of light, we could say beings of light would be general people who live in the spiritual world, and they're not necessarily angels, they're not necessarily archangels, they're not deities or devas. They're just beings who live in the spiritual world, and they are light beings, they are divine beings, but they're not necessarily classified as ascended masters or even angels or archangels.
Like Grandma or Aunt Sally kind of people like we were talking about before.
They could be those people. They could be our deceased relatives. Those would fit into that category. And other beings that just kind of live in the spiritual world.
They're just
some of whom never have taken human form. I mean, there are beings in the spiritual world who never took human form. There are beings in the astral world, demonic beings who never took human form. You don't have to necessarily be a human to be in these other planes.
Well, that opens up a whole nother door that I'm just not even gonna go there.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm just gonna hit the button because I want to keep going, but I think it's time for us to switch gears, and when we come back, because the music's going to come up here in a second, and we're going to start talking about the other part of the book, Ascension. I got a million questions about that. Okay, so we're going to go to a break. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're talking to Susan Shumsky about her book, Ascension, Connecting with Your Immortal Masters and Beings of Light. And don't forget, we still are going to do our Mind Yoga question for the day. If you're enjoying the programming, do mark the show as a favorite, and we'll be back after these words of our sponsor.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
deep inside yourself and venture into the realm of the unconscious mind with my Meditating on the Kabbalah guided imagery audio CDs. Discover who you are and what you want in life. Meditating on the Kabbalah can help you to open, clear, and revitalize the energetic pathways of your subtle being. They will support you in your spiritual quest by helping you to access the profound insights and inner guidance you need as you work in alignment with your highest good. Let them help you to release negative thoughts and emotions and clear away any limitations that may be keeping you from experiencing your full potential. Walk down the path to health, healing, understanding, and enlightenment with Meditating on the Kabbalah. Order your copy today at www.soulhealer.com. That's right, that's www.soulhealer.com.
Move past the crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationships, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
Start the year off right by visiting livinggrocery.com. Experience the miracle of real nutrition as it helps you to lose weight and improve your overall health. Don't mess with pills or capsules. We provide the highest quality, all-natural organic foods that come ready to eat. And best of all, it's delivered straight to your door. Visit livinggrocery.com now and experience your own amazing transformation.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio, and thank you for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Actually, I haven't announced Susan's website. It is drsusan.org. That's drsusan.org. And so we're continuing our conversation about her new book, Ascension, Connecting with the Immortal Masters and Beings of Light. Susan, totally unrelated question, but we've been talking a little bit about the different Indian Hindu gods. And I've always just wondered and never was tacky enough to ask anybody, but I'm going to be tacky and ask you, why are some of the gods blue in color?
Okay. Yeah. In fact, that's a really interesting question because we have this movie called Avatar, where he's got the blue beings. And, in fact, it's believed that at some point on this earth there were various races, and those people were blue. And the blue were the most highly evolved beings. But, in fact, avatars are often depicted as a blue. So that's the reason why we see them when they're depicted in artwork and so forth. They're this blue color to indicate, okay, this is a divine being, this is an avatar. For example, Lord Krishna is depicted as blue. Lord Rama is depicted as blue. And sometimes, not all the time, sometimes he's just depicted as just a regular skin color. But these full avatars are often depicted as blue. Supposedly there were various different races, the yellow, the blue, the brown, the white, different races on Earth that don't exist anymore. And as I said, the most highly evolved supposedly are the blue ones.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Actually, that does, now that you mention it, but when you think about that whole pantheon, like I always thought that Krishna was like some mega god up there with Brahma, and I didn't ever realize that he was an avatar until last week.
Krishna's an avatar, yes. He is an avatar of Lord Vishnu. He's one of the avatars of Lord Vishnu. The three major gods are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. That's the Hindu Trinity. And each one of those gods presides over one of the gunas, the three gunas, which are the three aspects of creation: the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer. You have to have all those three gunas or operators. You have to have one of those three operators. You have to have all three of those operators in order for any creation to take place, in order for the universe to get created, in order for anything to happen in this universe. All those three must be at work: the creating aspect, the maintaining aspect, and the destroying aspect. And you have to have the destroyer because you can't create anything new without destroying the previous state. In other words, for change to happen, there has to be the destroyer. You understand what I'm saying? So these gods represent those three gunas. That's really what they are. The three gods are the three gunas, the three aspects or operations that take place in this universe.
And I think a lot of people go, destroyer, God, that sounds so harsh. But if you kind of frame it in a different way, in order to bring something in new, you have to either let go of the old or purge the old, and that's kind of what that energy is doing, is making space for the new to come in. Because if there's no room for it to come in, nothing can change.
Right, exactly. And you have to, you can also think of it as purification, as eliminating the false, eliminating the negative in order for something more positive to come in. So, for example, Lord Shiva or Kali, these are the aspects of God that are the destroyer god and goddess. And you can call upon them when you want to change, when you want to eliminate your negative habits, when you want to sort of kill your negative ideas, your demonic aspects of yourself. You could call upon Lord Shiva. You can call upon Kali Ma to help you with that. It's very effective.
Okay, let's turn our attention to the other part of the book that we have not touched, which I think is fascinating, and I want to pretty much spend the rest of the show talking about it, which is the title of the book, Ascension. And we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can review what you actually mean when you talk about ascension.
Okay, ascension is an elevated state of being that any human being can attain with a highly evolved consciousness. So, in other words, the first step towards ascension is to attain spiritual enlightenment, to realize your true self, to realize who you truly are, and to live your true nature, to live your true purpose, to live your true destiny. That would be step one in the ascension process. And step two in the ascension process, if it is of divine will and if it is your own choice, is to transform this physical body into a light body. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the physical body is really not physical. Physics tells us, and the latest theoretical physics tells us, that everything in form is not really solid. It's not really in form. It's just kind of maybe a whole lot of little vibrations massed in one place, what they call superstrings or strings, which are simply vibrations, maybe little atoms or little particles with tremendous amount of space between those particles compared to the size of the particles. There's just mostly empty space. So this physical body that you inhabit is made mostly of empty space, or what we call Akash in India, which is the element of space. And there's not much physical substance to anything in this universe, including your physical body. So when you realize that, in fact, your body is mostly made of space and mostly there's no substance whatsoever, and in fact underlying that physical form, underlying any of the elements of earth, air, fire, water that make up the universe, earth, air, fire, water, space that make up the universe, that underlying that there is, in fact, light and sound. In fact, everything's made of sound. Vibration. Vibration is what everything's made of. So this physical form is not really solid. And you can realize the true form, which is a light body, a body made of.
Susan? Looks like she dropped off. So let's see if I can call her back real quick and get her back on the line. Let's see. And hopefully she realizes that she dropped.
Greetings. To leave a message for the author, please leave your name, address, phone number, and email.
That's not working. I'll bet she's just talking away. Don't you just hate when that happens? So let's see. If anyone has a question in the chat room, feel free to ask. I don't know if I have an answer for you, but we're just going to sit here and try to get Susan back on the line.
Hi, did you lose me?
I did.
When did you lose me? What was I talking about?
Disappeared into space.
Well,
I don't know. I just kind of started freaking out, going, "Uh-oh, I think she's gone." Maybe
so
you
I disappeared
ascended.
into a flash of light?
You
at
did.
What point did I disappear into the flash of light?
You were talking about I know I was saying to the listeners, it's like, I bet she's just talking away. Don't you just hate when that happens?
I was completely talking away.
What you were talking about was how their sound and vibration and, particles with a lot of space around them, and that was just about where we dropped.
All right. So that's what the physical body is made of. And so if you can consciously break down the elements, the 5 elements of the body, earth, water, fire, air, space, into its most fine material, which is really light and sound, because the entire universe is actually made of light and sound. If you can do that consciously, rather than just dropping the body or dying, and then, the soul and the mind and all these parts of the body leave the physical body. But if you can transform this body or break the body down into its finest material and have complete mastery over these 5 elements, then you can attain what's called ascension, where after you ascend, after you disappear in this flash of light, just as we read about in the Bible that Jesus did, and of course there's evidence of that from the Shroud of Turin, and there's evidence of that just from the story of how, he was in this cave and they rolled the stone away and he's not there, even though it was guarded day and night, there's nobody there. And there's many other stories like that in my book, Ascension, of other beings who did the same thing, including Swami Ramalinga Swami, who is from India. And there's an incredible story about him in my book, Ascension, of how he disappeared in a flash of light. Also, Annalise Guerin, who is an American Mormon woman who disappeared in a flash of light in the 1950s. And all of these beings who have done this, who have truly ascended, and of course our exemplar of that is Jesus, who ascended. And so disappearing in a flash of light, and then you are an ascended master who has complete mastery over all the laws of nature, over all of creation. You can then manifest any body that you want in any form at will at any time. Appear, disappear, appear to anyone at any time. That's an ascended master.
And what you're saying...
Attaining ascension. Attaining ascension is attaining physical immortality. Ascension isn't just, let's all become enlightened. I know that a lot of people define ascension as that, but that's not really ascension. That's called spiritual enlightenment. Ascension is physical immortality.
And what you're saying is that it's possible for people like you and me to just ascend.
I'm not saying that people like you and me can ascend, but I'm saying that any human being.
But just like regular people,
enough,
you don't have to be like
yes.
Jesus or some, great guy, person, girl.
Well, yes, you do have to. You have to be an enlightened master first. That's the prerequisite. That's number one prerequisite. And I might have talked about that when I was away and I was talking to myself a few minutes ago. But yes, the first prerequisite to ascension is spiritual enlightenment. So you do have to you have to realize who you truly are first. And then you can transform your body into a light body. But the number one step towards ascension is to attain spiritual enlightenment.
So meditating, once a
cannot
day and, doing nice things isn't going to get me there.
It's not going to cut
particularly.
it. Yeah, first of all, you have to, ascension is not something very ordinary. It's been attained by very, very few people compared to how many people there are on the earth. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there are monasteries that claim that tens of thousands of people, of their monks and nuns, have attained the rainbow body. It's rare. In other words, there is a handful of people that we've heard of that have attained ascension. It's a short list. So, no, it's not something that people normally attain. It's something very rare. But it is possible for anyone to attain it if with enough spiritual practices, with enough spiritual awakening, with realization of self, with elimination of all illusion, with complete understanding of reality. That's number one, spiritual enlightenment. Number two, complete mastery over all the laws of nature. Complete mastery, where you have transformed this physical form into a light body.
Do you think it was easier in earlier times as opposed to now to work through that process? I mean, we're in such a dense energy. We are so materialistic. We are so far from where I would assume you would need to be in order to move through that process. Do you think it was earlier, before we moved into the Kali Yuga, blah, 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 for people to attain that level of being?
Exactly. I mean, there are 4 yugas, there are 4 cycles of creation. There's the Sat Yuga, which is the age of enlightenment, the golden age. And we're not in the golden age right now. There is also Treta Yuga, where people are, in Kali Yuga, people are 100% developed. Let's put it that way. In Treta Yuga, people are 3/4 developed. In Dwapara Yuga, people are half developed. In Kali Yuga, people are not very developed. So we're talking about mental prowess, we're talking about intelligence, we're talking about length of life, longevity, we're talking about spiritual awakening. All of these are criteria for which yuga you're in, which cycle of life you're in, and these cycles last for thousands of years. So the cycles go on and on. These cycles repeat themselves, and there is what's called a golden age, or the age of enlightenment, or Sat Yuga. Satya means spiritual awakening, it means truth, actually. And when you're in that yuga of truth, that is the time when there are more enlightened beings. I'm not saying everybody's enlightened, but I'm saying that there are more enlightened beings. People are living their dharma or their true purpose and destiny. They are more attuned to spirit. They're more awakened. It's possible, much more possible and easier for them to attain spiritual enlightenment or to attain ascension. And by the way, ascension will never happen if it is not your destiny, if it's not the will of God for you to attain ascension. It isn't just something that you can just choose, okay, I think I'll ascend. I mean, obviously, we do create our reality, but it has to be like a co-creation with God within us, with the divine aspect of our being.
What happens if we don't
Your ego
ascend?
can't just... Your ego can't just decide one day, oh, I think I'll attain ascension. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I'm going to become an enlightened being, and, and then in 20 minutes I'll be ascending. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Well, I read your book. It should happen.
I know.
The question was, what happens to us if we don't ascend? I mean, other than die. But, is there a cycle or a process that happens to us?
Yes, in fact, there is. There are 7 choices you can make, basically. The first choice is the slow road of evolution, in which for countless lifetimes you incarnate again and again and again and again and again. You begin as a very lower life form, such as a rock, and then you become a plant, and then you become an animal. Eventually you become a human. Then you might become an angel. And you might continue on that slow road of evolution and eventually even become a deity or a devata. So that would be countless lifetimes over and over and over. You go into these various bodies. The second choice you might make is that at death, you can either go into the light or not go into the light at death. If you do not go into the divine light at death, or into what might be called heaven or the divine realm or the divine plane of existence, the spiritual world, if you don't go into that, then you would become an earthbound spirit. You might remain there for a very long time unless somebody can help you out of that morass. Or you might go into the light after death. Another choice that you could possibly make is that after death, you don't just become an earthbound spirit, you actually possess a human being. This often happens with people who are addicts, who want to continue with their addiction, or there are other reasons why a person might want to possess a human being. Maybe they feel that they want to give their message to humanity, or that they think that they're very frustrated, or they want to manipulate or control somebody, so they will attach themselves to a medium or a channeler or something like that. The fourth choice you might make is to become what we call a walk-in, and a walk-in would be somebody who doesn't go through the regular course of physical birth, but actually just takes over another person's body with their permission. Another choice you might make, the fifth choice, would be to attain spiritual enlightenment. And when you attain spiritual enlightenment, at death you can make one of 2 choices. You can either merge with the Absolute, which is sometimes called Brahman, or it is the all that is, the oneness, the wholeness. You can merge with that and become, you merge with, for example, you might call it the ocean of bliss. You merge into that ocean. So the drop becomes the ocean. Or you can maintain some semblance of individuality and live in a celestial world or a celestial realm with the personal god or deity of your choice and just become a devotee of that god. So you're living in a divine realm with your deity, and you're living a life of devotion in that realm. And then the sixth choice you might make would be to attain ascension while you're still alive, and that is to disappear into a flash of light while you're still alive. And there are some beings who have done that, including Annalise Guerin, including anyone who has attained ascension, who has become an ascended master, Saint Germain, Ramalinga Swamigal, so many people, and there are many of these beings that I talk about in my book Ascension, and you can read about their stories. The seventh or last choice would be attaining ascension near or after death. That would be, for example, the Tibetan Buddhists who go into the little yurt or little tent right before they die and they attain ascension, or Jesus who attained his ascension after death. So those are the basic 7 choices that a person can make.
That's a lot of choices.
It is.
But
I
most
guess people, they just go on the normal, slow road of evolution. If you don't do some spiritual practice to cut that road short, then you will just continue on and on and on and on. One body to the next body to the next body.
Oh, look, I'm a rock again.
It doesn't usually go that way. It's rare for a person to go into a lower life form unless, well, it's possible, but it isn't done very often.
One of the things you talked about in Ascension was different levels even in the spiritual plane, or, there's one we pass, but then there's and I'm probably not saying this right, but different levels of attainment that we can achieve even on that side as well?
Oh, yes. I mean, the thing is that you, as I said before, after you achieve spiritual enlightenment, you can either merge with the Absolute, or you can maintain some individuality and live in a celestial world and be a devotee of God. I'm not sure exactly if you're talking about that or if you're talking about different levels of our higher self. I'm not sure exactly what your question is.
I don't know. I didn't write my question down, but I just was thinking about it. We'll just go on. One of the things that you mentioned was heaven. I think a lot of people really are fixated on the concept of, when you die, you go to heaven or you go down there. And what you're really talking about, with some of the stuff is reincarnation. And does heaven fit into this whole concept at all, or is that just...
Yeah, it does. The heaven
mistake?
is basically the spiritual plane. The spiritual plane we talked about, the spiritual plane, that is heaven. Heaven is a realm of light, a realm of peace, a realm of joy, a realm where God lives, where the divine beings and angels and archangels live, and that is heaven. That is a heavenly sphere or heavenly realm, the celestial world. That is heaven. And there are other planes of existence that aren't heaven. There's the astral world, and there's the mental world. Excuse me. So there are these various planes of existence, and I personally don't believe in hell, but I would think that it would be a hellish kind of existence to be in the astral world because you're stuck, you're stranded, you have not gone into the light, and it may be kind of hellish for some people, although some people are just kind of in a somnambulant state. They're not really very aware of anything. They're just kind of hanging around as an earthbound spirit. So, I mean, you could call that hell if you want, but it isn't really hell. There's no burning. There's no Satan. There's no devils wandering around with red tails and, horns or anything like that.
That's a good thing, I guess.
Well, I just, you could create a hell because we can create anything. We could make a hell if we wanted and live in that. You can... It's amazing how much power human beings and human thought has. And you're powerful not only during your life, you're powerful after death, too. You can create any kind of scenario you want to create after death. Basically create anything.
What about somebody who lived their life in pure evil? When they pass, they are just, loaded with issues. I mean, that's what I like to say, about the attached entities and the nasty ones that hang out on the astral world is they're people, but they got issues, and some got a lot of issues. But can there be a group of these souls that would actually go somewhere to even a lower plane because of the level of evil? I mean, I don't want to say demonic, but evil that they possess?
Well, they might be in the astral world, or if they actually have a belief in God, even though they're evil, even though maybe they have a lot of shortcomings and they could, they can't really help themselves, so to speak. I mean, they're just so, they have so many issues, as you say. But if they actually believe in God and if they are willing to go into that light, then they will go into the light. Everyone has the opportunity to go into the light. Anyone can go into the light after death. They go into heaven.
Don't choose.
And then they choose their next, and they make a decision and choose their next incarnation.
And so do you think that we get to choose our incarnation and the lessons we learn, or do you think that it's kind of willy-nilly and we have free will about the whole thing?
Well, we have free will. We have free will here with every choice that we make here on Earth, and we also have free will on the other side. And we may have a little council meeting with our higher self, decide what I think to happen.
All right, you're fading out, so we're going to go to break. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're talking to Susan Shumsky. Her website is drsusan.org. We're going to be back with the Mind Yoga question after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
Crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationships, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
Hi, I'm James Alpha Yanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio. Listen to Dr. Rita's Soul Healer Moment live each third Sunday night of the month on Feet to the Fire. www.feet2fire.com for more information.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rita Louise, the host of Just Energy Radio and the founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics. Start a new career today on the leading edge of alternative health and healing. The Institute of Applied Energetics can help you develop the specialized skills you need to work as an energy medicine practitioner, intuitive counselor, or professional medical intuitive. Besides our outstanding technical instruction, our programs also support you in creating and building a successful business in this rapidly growing field. Be a catalyst for changing the way healthcare is done around the world. Contact the Institute of Applied Energetics right away or visit appliedenergeticsinstitute.com.
How would you like to live long and enjoy great health? How about creating solid bones and whiter teeth? Strengthen your heart and eyes and have radiant, youthful-looking skin. There is an ancient health and longevity secret that has been used for millennia in Egypt, India, and China that can help you achieve this. For the first time in the modern world, Pearlsium brings this ancient wellness secret to you. For more information about Pearlsium, visit www.productsforthesoul.com.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and it's time for our Mind Yoga question of the week. And so it's time to stretch those brain cells, because I have to tell you, last week somebody sent in the reply to justenergyradio@yahoo.com and wrote, duh, Council of Nicaea. So I decided that the questions I've been asking have been way too easy for you guys because you are all so smart. And I just really want you to have to stretch those brain cells. So here's the high school version of the question. Okay. The earliest reference to a system of 7 archangels as a group appears in what ancient Jewish religious work? And I will repeat that and post it in the chat room. The earliest reference to a system of 7 archangels as a group appears in what ancient Jewish religious work? If you think you know what the answer is, if you know what the answer is, if you don't know what the answer is, do send in the answer to justenergyradio@yahoo.com. The first person to get the answer correct will win a copy of Divine Soul Songs by Dr. Shaw. And everyone, that's right, that means you too, everyone that enters will have a chance to win a free psychic reading from the students at the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. I'm going to read this question back one more time, and then we're going to get Susan back on the air. The earliest reference to a system of 7 archangels as a group appears in what ancient Jewish religious work? Again, send your answers to justenergyradio@yahoo.com. Okay, so I have Susan back on the line. Hey, Susan.
Hey.
Still there? I'm like, okay, your number's there. I'm hoping you're there.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good.
If we want to get off the wheel of life and death, what can we do? Is there any steps that we can take today to make it so that we can move along toward that ascension process?
Exactly. That's a great question. And in fact, the single most important thing that you can do to attain higher consciousness, to get off the wheel of birth and death, to attain what we call moksha, which means freedom from this wheel, freedom from the incarnation, from the continual coming back again and again and again with reincarnation. The single most important thing you can do is to realize who you really are, realize yourself. And that is usually done through meditation. Traditionally, meditation is the way to attain spiritual enlightenment. Because when you meditate, you turn your attention within. Usually our attention is completely engulfed with the experiences of the senses, the outer senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, feeling. When you close your eyes and begin to go deep within, you begin to experience the inner world rather than the outer world. So your attention is drawn into the inner senses, into the inner experience. And then when you go even deeper into that meditation, you're reducing the sensory input even more and more until you go beyond the senses and even beyond the mind, and you go into a state that we might call transcendental awareness, or the state of the absolute, or the state of samadhi. Samadhi meaning the state of evenness of mind and stillness of body, into a state where you realize self, where you are in that blissful state, the state of Sat Chit Ananda, or absolute bliss consciousness. And when you experience that inner state of awareness, when you experience that state of the absolute, then you are realizing your true nature. You're realizing who you really are. So meditation is traditionally the way to experience that. And there are other ways to experience it, by the way. It's not the only way, but it is the traditional way of attaining spiritual enlightenment, is to meditate on a regular basis, to experience that higher self on a regular basis until it becomes familiar to you, until it actually becomes so familiar that you realize that that's who you really are. It isn't just some odd spiritual experience that you suddenly have. It's an everyday experience. It becomes absolutely everyday and mundane. When that experience of the absolute, that experience of samadhi, or the experience of Sat Chit Ananda, the experience of absolute bliss consciousness, becomes completely mundane, becomes your everyday experience, which happens gradually. It's not something that's instantaneous. Okay, it's something that happens gradually over time. It's just like in India, my guru used to use this analogy. In India, the way that they dye cloth is that they take a piece of white cloth, they dump it in a vat of dye, and then they take it out and they dry it in the sun. And then the next day they dump it in the dye again and then put it out to dry. And continuing to do that over and over again, the cloth eventually becomes color fast. Similarly, your mind becomes color fast. Your mind becomes saturated with bliss consciousness when you meditate on a regular basis, when you continually are putting your mind into that vat of bliss consciousness, into that vat of consciousness, then you let it fade. In other words, you go about your day and then you sit down and meditate the next time, and then eventually that becomes color fast. It becomes just a part and parcel of your being. You have realized yourself. You have attained that full state of spiritual enlightenment in which you 24/7 are in touch with your true nature of being. You're in touch with your higher self. So that would be your first step towards ascension, is to attain that spiritual state. Now, there are other ways to do that. In fact, I have an entire chapter in my book called The Easy Way, in which there is a practice. It's actually a meditation practice, too, though. It's a meditation. It's called practicing the beam. And that's a very powerful way to attain ascension very quickly, or attain spiritual enlightenment very quickly, let's put it that way. And the beam is just basically to make the decision to surrender to that divine presence and to experience it for just a few minutes, perhaps 3 times a day.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. One of the things that I know about meditation, and I think I have the T-shirt of, it's time to surrender from, just my life experience, is that when you meditate and when you find that quiet spot inside of yourself, it also gives you the opportunity to start looking at and letting go of your issues. And so even if you don't obtain spiritual enlightenment, maybe you won't get stuck here being somebody's attached entity and, some dead guy that's got a bunch of issues that doesn't even make it into the light, which would be really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, in recent years there has been a lot of conversation about, us becoming our authentic self, et cetera, et cetera. Would this finding enlightenment, would that be kind of the same thing we're talking about here?
Well, the people who mouth these words about authentic self and so forth, they may or may not have any clue as to what spiritual enlightenment is, but in fact, the true way to find your authentic self, your real self, is to realize God within you, that God dwells within you. And that is that experience of Sat Chit Ananda, or absolute bliss consciousness. That is the experience of God within you. Actually, there's 2 aspects of God. There's what we call the impersonal aspect of God, and there's the personal aspect of God. The impersonal God is the experience of Sat Chit Ananda, the experience of absolute bliss consciousness. The experience of the personal God would be communicating with and having experiences of deity, the deity, the God of your understanding. So these are 2 aspects of God, and what I teach, which is called divine revelation, helps people to experience both the impersonal God and the personal God. What I experienced when I was in the ashram for 22 years, I experienced the impersonal God, which is that experience of Sat Chit Ananda, and that was an experience that we had in meditation on a daily basis. The highest level of spiritual enlightenment is attained by experiencing and realizing the self as the impersonal God, actually.
Okay, I'm not sure where to go with that.
I don't know, maybe I didn't explain it well enough.
Well, and our time is getting kind of finite, and I have 2 more questions that I'm hoping that we can get to.
Let's move on. If people want to learn more about the impersonal and personal God, then they should read my book, Divine Revelation, and also my book, How to Hear the Voice of God.
Perfect. We started the show talking about Ascended Masters. Now we're talking about Ascension. So let's tie this together. Can we work with our immortal masters and the beings of light to help us along the process of experiencing enlightenment, achieving enlightenment, and ultimately being able to ascend?
Absolutely, and that's a really good question because, in fact, the inner teachers, what I call the inner teachers or inner gurus, could be one, could be plural, doesn't matter, but if it's an authentic divine being, they will help you in your pathway. And it's really important to have a dialogue with them, to communicate with them on a daily basis, and then they will guide you. They will tell you this is the next step to take. They'll answer all your questions. They will give you confidence. They will help you. They will bolster you. They'll be your cheerleading squad. They'll help you in every way to attain your goals. And if your goal is to attain spiritual enlightenment, they will guide you towards that. They're not coercive. They're not manipulative. They won't come without being called upon. They never come unbidden. They're entirely permissive, but they will come immediately if you call upon them, and they will assist you. They will help you. The important thing is to learn how to open to these divine beings so that you can hear them, so that you can experience them. And they will guide you with such love and such humor and such joy. And they're so fun to be around because they're always cracking jokes. They're always, they're just so much fun to have a relationship with a divine being, with your higher self, with your God nature, with these aspects of being that are in your own inner stream of identity. And so you can communicate with these divine beings, and they will guide you. They will heal you. They will inspire you. They'll give you all the ideas, all the creative ideas. They'll give you inspiration. They'll give you everything that you need in your spiritual development, and they will tell you what to do next. They'll, if you ask, they will give you guidance and help you on your path. It's like having an in-house counselor inside.
Susan, I just can't imagine cracking jokes with Krishna or Jesus. I just can't even wrap my mind around what that would be like.
They're fun, especially Babaji. He's the biggest jokester. He's very fun.
Well, maybe I'll have to look him up. I would make the assumption that surrendering and being open and receptive to the message and then listening to the message, which I know you talk about in your other book, is the key to working with them. Because I'm sure they could just be like, blah, 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 and you're like, yeah, I'll get to it. But if you're not listening and acting, nothing's really going to happen.
Yeah, Rita Louise, it's very easy to open to spirit, to open to that divine voice. Really, all you have to do is ask for it. It's really that simple. And it's not that difficult to learn how to just tell the difference, to distinguish between the true divine voice and other voices in your mind. There's 10 tests that you can learn about. But the difficult part, the most challenging part, is actually following the guidance. It's when they tell you, yes, this is the direction to take, is to actually act upon that. And that is extremely challenging for almost everybody. So, following the guidance is not necessarily easy because you're going to be stretched. You're going to step out of your comfort zone. You will be guided to do things that are uncomfortable. You'll be guided to do things that are difficult, that seem impossible. But if you're willing to do that stretch, if you're willing to just take a leap of faith, to just leap off that cliff, you'll know that either God is going to catch you or you're going to have to learn how to fly real fast. So you're going to just take that leap of faith, and you will be amazed and inspired and awed at what your life can be. Your life will take on new meaning and new tenor when you listen to the still small voice of God within, or these divine beings within, and follow their guidance. And you'll just be so amazed at what your life will become just by following that inner guidance, that still small voice of God within you.
I find on a personal note that even though you have challenges, life, I don't want to say it's easier, but it's there's less drama maybe. It's less peaks and valleys. You just kind of move along and move from one thing to the next thing. And, you have bad days. Your car breaks down. Things happen, but it's a very different energy when you just are listening and following.
Exactly. That's very, very true. That's right. As is described in the Bhagavad Gita, which is probably the greatest scripture ever written, well, Krishna describes what it's like to be an enlightened person. When Arjuna asks him, how does an enlightened man sit? How does he stand? How does he act? How does he walk? How is he dressed, and so forth? And Krishna just ignores all these different external marks of what a enlightened being would be. Instead, he talks about the inner status of consciousness in which the person is satisfied and content in the self, by the self alone. The person is not fazed by the dramas around them. They're not fazed by things that happen to them, no matter if bad or good things happen. These are just judgments. They're not real. And in fact, the person is in equanimity. The person is in peace and harmony and love and light and joy. I shouldn't say joy, bliss is the right word for it. The person is in a state of content, of permanent content and equanimity. That is spiritual enlightenment.
Ching! I need finger symbols. Let's see. We have. We have time.
Good.
Obviously, everyone I know that's listening, has heard, 2012 is coming, the Mayan calendar, blah, 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 blah. There's kind of the two groups. There's the apocalyptic group, we're going to blow ourselves up. There is the other camp that puts out the thought that 2012 is going to trigger a stage of us developing and potentially ascending from the physical plane to a higher level of being. When I think of that, I kind of think about the Left Behind series, that, there's a bunch of people left, and the ascended masters or ascended beings are the ones that disappear, which I'm like, ooh, pick me. But what do you think? I mean, your area is ascension, and I know that you are, very, very knowledgeable in the Hindu texts and stuff, and I know they talk about, the end of the world, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think?
Well, the end of the world is not scheduled for December 21st, 2012. I'll tell you that right off. It's definitely not scheduled for that date in the Indian tradition. So you might as well, you might as well realize that on December 22nd you will wake up and it will be the same as December 21st. So really nothing's going to happen as far as on that particular date. There may be a subtle, for people who are really sensitive and highly evolved, they may notice a pulse of energy on that date, a cosmic experience of awakening, or a cosmic pulse supposedly is going to take place on that date because of an alignment, planetary alignment. Now, as far as the 2012 event, okay, so 2012 is a date, but in fact, over the last 50 years or so, since the middle of the 20th century, there has been what we might call an ascension of consciousness, a raising of consciousness. The world is a completely different place than it was in 1950 or 1960. It's completely different. And you see the evidence in that all around you. You see health food stores all over the place. You see people eating organic food. You see people meditating. You see yoga classes all over everywhere. You see esoteric books in mainstream bookstores, not just in esoteric bookstores. You see Oprah Winfrey having Eckhart Tolle on a 10-week webinar or whatever it was. You have so many evidences that the world is in a completely new state of consciousness. And this is an event that's not one date on a calendar. It's not December 21st, 2012. It's a raising of consciousness. It's a going into a different age or different era of time in which we are on a higher vibrational level. And evidences also are included even in the medical field, and people are living longer, and people are more healthy at older ages. Longevity, all these things indicate that we are going into a more enlightened era. So that's not just one day or one event. That's an event that just takes place over decades, and that's what we're in right now. We're in the ascension, in the 2012 event. We are in the event, and the event started in about 1950 or 60.
Do you think the direction that we're heading, and I'm saying globally as a people, is that we are moving to where we can finally ascend from this physical plane and not have to come back here anymore because we've learned all of our lessons and taken all of those steps that we need to? Or do you think this plane will always exist?
Oh, this plane will always exist. It's not like the physical universe is going to disappear. No, the planes of existence are always there, and individually people attain spiritual enlightenment. It's not a group thing. It's an individual thing. People attain higher consciousness. Now, when I say it's not a group thing, I'm not saying that that there aren't more people are doing that, because there are. I mean, people are really becoming more aware. People are becoming more spiritually evolved right now, and there's more people doing that. And because of that, the vibration of the earth has lifted a lot. There is no longer a dense vibration, as dense as when I was born. I mean, I remember the 50s, 60s, I was there. And it's a totally different vibration now. The atmosphere around the earth is no longer heavy and dense as it was before. Heavy and dense, I'm talking about thought forms, I'm talking about entities, I'm talking about dense vibrations in the atmosphere, and that has lifted. So we're on a higher vibrational level. Our consciousness is on a higher vibrational level, and therefore the Earth's atmosphere, the mental atmosphere of the Earth, I'm not talking about the physical atmosphere. The physical atmosphere is the same as it always was. Mother Earth is the same as it always was. But our mental atmosphere has transformed, and we are on a higher vibrational level. There is more light, there is more love, there is more joy, there is more peace, all of these things. And I know that people would argue against that, but maybe they don't remember 1950. I do. It's different.
I'll never tell.
Really, really different. Very different than it used to be.
Susan, the music's going to come up here in a second, and I just want to thank you. Oh, there it is. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your wisdom. You're great. I love having you on.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I'll be glad to come back anytime.
Well, you know that I'll have you back. And your book, major bookstores, Amazon, stuff like that?
Sure, anywhere. The book is called Ascension. My website is drsusan.org.
Perfect. And it's always listed on the Just Energy Radio Show website so that they can always get a hold of you at any time. Again, Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we will talk to you again. And next week, we have Ariel Ford talking about the soulmate secret, and Ken Gerhardt, cryptozoologist, who's going to be talking about monsters, mysteries, or myths. And again, don't forget to answer the Mind Yoga question of the week. So until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise.
Join
Thanks
host
for listening.
Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita. Until next time, remember, it's all just energy.